Hey everyone, in today's video I'm going to be talking about the typeof function in JavaScript, and I'm going to be talking about some of the benefits and downfalls of this function, and I'm going to show you code examples of how we can use it to our advantage, alright, and some workarounds on the downfalls that I will mention about this function. Alright, so let's jump into this. So I have a few points on the benefits. So the first one is it will protect us against accessing properties on a variable that is null or undefined. Alright, and what I mean by here is you're trying to access a property on an object. Alright, so let's say you have an employee object and you want to access the name of that object. Okay, so name is a property, but what if that object is not an object and it's null? It's going to throw an exception. So whenever you guys have a function, you want to protect yourself against that. So I have a simple JS file open. I'm just going to use Node to execute some of these functions. I might use a browser in case I need to for some of the examples down the road, but for now I can just use Node. So I'm just going to have a function, and I'm going to say display employee details. Alright, and I'm going to be expecting an employee object. So I'm just going to assume that employee is always going to be an object. So here I'm going to say employee.name and then employee.age. Okay, so let's say I call this function and I do pass it an object. So I'm just going to console.log. Now if I pass in an object, I'm going to open up the terminal and I'm just going to clear this, and then I'm going to do node index. So it's just going to be undefined, which is fine because we're passing an object, but it doesn't have these keys. So if I do pass in name and I just say Joe and age of 24. Okay, so node index, and it's going to actually work. So now the problem is, if let's say another developer is using this function, but they're using some variable that's globally scoped and somehow it gets set to null or undefined. So I'm just going to pass in null. And now if I run this function, it's going to throw an exception. It's going to say cannot read property name of null. So typeof will actually be really useful here. So if I say if typeof employee, if it's not equal to an object, return empty string. Okay. Now let's see. What do you guys think will happen? Is it going to return an empty string, or is it going to throw another exception? It's going to throw the same exception again. Unfortunately, one of the downfalls, let me come back here. One of the downfalls of typeof is that typeof null returns an object. It's a long time bug in JavaScript. I'm sure many of you may be aware. If not, this is something new that you might have learned. And yeah, so we need to work around this always. We need to, anytime you're checking for typeof to anything with an object, you need to preface it by this. If employee is equal to null, okay, or this. So whenever you're accessing the properties, you want to, so if it's null, then it's going to straight return this because it's going to be true. And if it's not equal to an object, so let's say you pass in a boolean or something by mistake, it'll come in here. So now if I run this, okay, so it returned an empty string. All right, so now let's just say I pass in anything else, it should return empty strings. Perfect. All right, so that's the first example. So I'm just going to say Neil, age, whatever, 25. Okay, so now it's working. So what we just did here leads me to my second point on the benefits. We have the ability to type guard the parameters in our functions. So what we just did actually is we prevented accessing properties on a null, or even we would need to check for undefined in this case. Undefined though does not throw in, does not return an object. So let's just make sure of that. Oh, okay. I missed the parentheses. Let me come back here. It should return a, so type of undefined returns undefined, because that works properly. So with that being said, we type guarded our function against this parameter. So this is a good standard to follow, I would say. When you guys are writing your JavaScript code, since we don't have the benefits of using types, like in TypeScript, we have to add these kind of conditions to protect us, because whenever you're writing the code, you'll know it'll probably work, but when another developer comes in and writes code, you want to protect against this kind of stuff happening. And it could also be in your case where you accidentally pass in some null or something because you're working in an existing code base and you're not aware of all the functionality that goes into this. So this is one good way of protecting yourself with typeof. All right, so now I'm going to come back here. So okay, so I talked about type guard the parameters in your function, so that example kind of covered that. I'm going to talk about the one downfall that I did not talk about, and then let's go into code examples. So this is an array that I'm passing in. It's going to return an object. All right, so that doesn't really help us always, because if we want to loop through an array, let's say we want to use a array method like array filter, array map, something like that, we want to actually make sure that it's an array that we're working with. And I'll show you a workaround for that and how we can use that workaround to kind of bypass this. So typeof won't actually help us here. Okay, so I can come in here and let's kind of do this. Let's come down here. I'm going to create an add function, and it's going to just accept two parameters, x and y. All right, you can call them whatever you want. So now I'm going to say return x plus y. All right, so now let me show you some of the cases here. So if I do 1 and 1, let me open up the terminal, it's going to be 2. But let's say if I do 1 and I pass in a string of 1, it's going to be 11. All right, so you want to protect yourself against that in case that happens. So we want to say if type of x is not equal to a number, not that number, or so either or of them is not equal to a number, we need to return something. Okay, so we can console.error something, or we can return a default value or something. If you're expecting only positives, you can do this, but if you're expecting any range of numbers, then returning a number might not be good. I would probably, in this case, throw an error. Input params need to be a type of number. Okay, so if I do that, it's going to throw an error. All right, perfect. So that's where we can use typeof. In this case, we type guarded our parameters and we protected against using incorrect types. So that's one example. Another example we have is, let's go to the arrays one. So let's say I want to filter employees by age. All right, and we're going to pass in an array of objects here. All right, so let's assume employees is a array, and we're going to use the filter method, and in here we're going to have employee. All right, so we're going to say employee dot age. All right, and you know what, let's just do this. We're just going to do an array of numbers. Age is greater than, I don't know, let's just do 21. So I'm going to pass it, I'm going to call this function filter employees by age, and in the as an argument I'm going to pass an array, and then let's just do some different types of ages here. Alright, so it's going to filter and return a new array of employees that are greater than 21. Okay, so if I call this, so it's going to call these, return this array, which is correct. Now, what if I passed in an object? Well, it's going to return an error. It's going to throw an error saying it's employees.filter is not a function. So let me just show you if we use typeof here. If employees typeof is not equal to object, let's see if that works. So I would just return an empty array. Okay. So it is an object. That's why it tried to call the filter. And because of that, it threw an error. So what we need to do, actually, there's a object called array. All right, and in this array, we have a property called isArray function. So if we pass in employees here, and let's say if it's not an array, it's going to return an empty array. So that is how we want to work around that, and that is one of the downfalls of typeof, but there's an easy workaround, and it works with all the browsers, all the modern browsers, so that's a good thing. All right, so that's another example, and the last example that I'm going to go over is let's say we want to pass in a callback function into our function, and let's see how we can use typeof to protect against that type guard, the function parameter. So here we're going to need the browser because I'm going to make a API call, and I'm expecting a callback function to be returned, to be passed in as an argument here. All right, so I'm going to say fetch, and then I'm just going to quickly write the base of this. So response.json. I want to convert that to JSON format, and then we'll get some data. And then here, I'm just going to console.log the data for now. But in this then in the final one, I want to call this callback function, all right? Because it's supposed to do something beneficial for us. Let's just say. So I'm going to come in here. Let's actually do this. So I have an HTML file. I just did Shift+1 enter, and then I included the JS file here. So that's all you guys need to do. I'm going to go ahead and open this with Live Server. Okay, perfect. So here, let's do JSON placeholder API, I believe. All right, so I'm just going to copy this. So if I run this, yeah, it'll return that. That's what I want. So let's say I come in here. So I'm going to pass in this URL here. All right, so it's going to grab me a to-do. And then once let's log it. Let me call this. So API call. Okay, whoops. Let's come in here. Don't need that. Let me inspect this. So if we come to the console, it's going to return an object, and that's what we expect. Now let's say I have a callback function. Let's say I want the callback function to, I don't know, it can do anything. Let's just say I wanted to print out the title or something for this case. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and execute this function. All right, and it's going to throw an error. So let's just, callback function is not a function. So what we can do to protect ourselves against that is we can say if callback function, if type of callback function is equal to a function. Okay, we can do that. We're going to call this. We can safely call this now because we know it's a function. Now if we come in here, nothing will happen because it's not a function. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pass in a function. So I'm going to say we can either do arrow function or just our normal functions that we're used to. So we're going to say we're going to be expecting the data that's coming from here. All right, and then we're going to just console.log data.title. I might have too many parentheses or too less. Yeah, too many. Okay, so now it's going to be expecting something in here. So now if that runs, there we go. It ran the output of the title. Now what if I didn't do that? It's going to say, can I read properties of undefined? Because we're not passing in anything here, it's going to throw an error. All right. So that's it, guys. That's what I wanted to show you guys about typeof. And I hope you guys learned something new, or I kind of refreshed some of your, knowledge on this typeof function. I hope this video was beneficial. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys did like this video, please do like it and please subscribe to the channel for more content. Thank you guys again. See you next time. Bye-bye.